More than 5 years ago, I took a look at the iconic history of the North Wilkesboro Speedway, a racetrack born in the late 1940s from the area's long history of racing, and one that would take a hand in building one of the largest spectator sports of all time. Since then, the decline of the track has been well known, and to the detriment of race fans, likely a sour future for this adored raceway. In my video, I said the deterioration is likely too far gone, alluding to the possibility that the economics of bringing it back were very slim. But since my video came out, a ton has happened with this abandoned track, and against seemingly all odds and my own predictions, the racetrack is back. This is the 2023 update for the North Wilkesboro Speedway. The last time I talked about this track was in early 2018. If you want to learn more about the full history of this track and why it had been so loved by race fans, go watch my abandoned episode on it. But at the time, things were looking pretty bad at North Wilkesboro. After decades of minimal maintenance, the grandstands, the buildings, and the pavement were all in very rough condition. The abandoned track was also subject to arson, as in July 2018, a fire broke out in the pit row building, causing over $80,000 in damages. The years of bad news and hopeless thoughts were actually starting to change, though. Fans on Twitter were asking the question if the iconic track would be featured in iRacing, a virtual NASCAR game that would later be used by drivers for the 2020 pandemic season. Ultimately, iRacing agreed to include the track. This was spearheaded by former driver Dale Earnhardt Jr., who had been a longtime advocate on preserving the speedway. So, in late 2019, the weeds were trimmed and the track was scanned to be implemented in the game, which would later see a wide public release in early 2020. In November 2021, North Carolina's governor signed a budget plan to allocate $40 million to 3 tracks in the state, one of them being the abandoned North Wilkesboro Speedway. This money would be coming from the massive infrastructure bill that had recently been passed in Congress. Now, I'm not sure if this was the best use of money designated to be used for public infrastructure, since at the end of the day, this track was privately owned, but regardless, this was enormous news. For decades, the city and the track's owners failed to find enough private investment to reopen it. And now, with the state government on their side, the racetrack would finally have the support it would need to get things moving again. Speedway Motorsports Inc., the company that owned North Wilkesboro Speedway, had been in negotiations with key executives at NASCAR and state leaders, all publicly stating they haven't forgotten about the track, nor have they lost interest. This was proven true, as plans were then drafted up on how the facility built over 50 years ago and subsequently decaying over the last 20 or so would be brought back for a modern world with modern racing. While minor work was being done at the track, the city of North Wilkesboro had unveiled their massive plan to modernize the derelict facility. The concept art was actually very promising. The renovations were designed by a New York-based architectural firm named Perkins Eastman, and it looks like they completely understood what made the track so special. Instead of building monolithic concrete structures or a massive condo building like some tracks, they understood the importance of keeping with the heritage of North Wilkesboro. Despite the modernization of all the facilities within, the Speedway continues to retain its small-town feel. Everything right down to the grandstands, appearing just as they did half a century ago, now just with new materials. Key buildings like the press box would remain as it was to ensure the soul of the track wouldn't be lost. With these plans in place and the money secured, construction began on the revitalization of the track in late 2021. This began with the demolition of a few structures that couldn't be saved, mainly the wooden VIP boxes and the majority of the rotten grandstands themselves. The field was plowed up, new concrete was poured, and floodlights were installed, all while local painters were brought in to hand paint the directional signs just like they did 50 years ago. This work continued through the summer of 2022, but with the facility in a fine enough condition, the decision was made to host a number of races in August under the name Racetrack Revival, with legends like Ryan Newman and even Dale Earnhardt Jr. himself all at the wheel. Dale Earnhardt joined in as a particularly special guest, considering he was the one who helped get the revival off the ground and into reality. So, in August 2022, fans packed the sold-out race for the first time in many years. years. They filled the grandstands of a half under construction and half slightly abandoned racetrack in a truly surreal sight for those who have been following the story. Following this race, NASCAR officially announced their plans to put all of these renovations in use. The organization unveiled their intentions to bring the NASCAR All Star race, one of the largest events of the yearly racing lineup, to the track. For longtime fans, the All Star race used to be known as the Winston, which of course is what North Wilkesboro was best known for. So bringing the All Star race here was truly an incredible return for this track. Later, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series was also added to the event lineup. Another historic return, as the Truck Series was one of the last NASCAR events to take place at this track before it closed in 1996. And that brings us to now, with the majority of the work at North Wilkesboro Speedway finished or scheduled to be completed very soon. It will need to be, since the NASCAR All Star race is slated to take place here on May 21st, 2023. Obviously, I talk a lot about abandoned places, but there are very few locations that I can think of that actually return to their former selves. It's incredibly rare, and of course North Wilkesboro has some advantages, since the majority of the facilities are rather simplified, all outside, and don't need that much work to be done. At least not as much as some other buildings like, say, Charity Hospital or some other massive abandoned structure. But still, all the pieces needed to fall in place here. Millions of dollars needed to be injected, and it took key people from NASCAR, the state, and legendary drivers to get the project off the ground. But I think it goes to show how special this place really is. And I think it was a brilliant move by everyone's part, since I don't think there's many race fans that don't love this track. People really miss the rougher vintage tracks of NASCAR's past. And now with major races returning to Wilkesboro, North Carolina, a new generation of people will be able to experience something we had all thought was lost forever. If you're looking to travel, or if you want to just enrich your life and learn something new, then today's sponsor Babbel is a great way to easily learn a new language. I've mentioned before that I love visiting Montreal, a predominantly French-speaking city, and as someone who did horrifically bad in French class, I've always struggled with understanding and speaking the language. Babbel has changed that for me, with their simple and easy to understand lessons designed by real language teachers. It's become rather addictive, and it's been easy to stick with my self-set daily lessons. Since it's one of the premier language learning apps, the complexity of what you're learning is never overwhelming, and that just makes the whole process much easier than how I remember it in the 6th grade. So if you want to easily learn a new language through Babbel, you can get 60% off your subscription plus a 20-day money-back guarantee by clicking my special link in the description below. Anyway guys, my name is Jake, and thank you very much for watching.